It's been very profound. Every time I have tried the same exact piece of music at 440 hertz versus 432 hertz, everyone, and I do like a blind test, I don't tell them what I'm doing, they always respond to the 432 hertz every single time. They always say, it feels better. One of my good musician friends always says, you don't work music, you play music. We have to get into our inner child to be able to be musical. So I recommend everyone find an instrument, start playing, just get into it. We can come together regardless of all of our differences to help ourselves not only heal with sound, with music, with dance, but also how do we expand and evolve with music, sound, dance, all these incredible things. I think really now is the time that we lean on these tools, these modalities more than ever because of all that's happening, not just for our own sanity and our own healing, but to really come into this new frequency and to expand and to evolve. Come check us out in Sedona. I just can't wait to see what we create with that. It's going to be so fun. The land does so much already, and it's such a magical, special place.
Welcome, everyone, to Soul Communication. In the second episode of season 3, I'm excited to continue talking about Special Place on Earth, which is Sedona. Last episode, we had York Wing talk about Asasani Collective and ships that are over this beautiful interdimensional portal in Sedona called Bell Rock. In April, I'm having beautiful retreat with amazing team where we're going to do breathwork, Kundalini, light language, and a lot of various activations, also with music, because music and sound healing are essential to expanding our consciousness, but also activating those special codes. I am excited to talk about that with Chris Noble, who is one of the facilitators who will be with us in Sedona. He's a musician, a sound healer, and a specialist in 432 hertz music, which we'll learn more about today. Welcome, Chris. I'm so happy to have you here,
Thank you so
brother.
much, Deanna. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited about what's coming for us soon in April and all the amazing co creation we can do together. And you and I were at Galactic Cruise in December. I know you do photography and videography and music, a lot of things you bring into different kind of experiences across the world. As you've been journeying and sharing your beautiful gifts with the world, what excites you today? Where you are today in your
That's such
journey?
a good question. Thanks for asking. I think really what excites me right now is where we're at. Where we're at right now as a collective and as a species. It's a really exciting place to be. I think that right now is the time that we need to start coming together more. For me with music, I can't think of a more unifying art form and way of communication, which is music. It's that universal language. It's something that's so profound when I've traveled the world playing music with different people, different places, different languages. It cuts through all of that and it just gets to the core of who we are, gets right to that love frequency that we all are. And I absolutely love the language of music. And now more than ever, I just want to lean on music and, of course, things like dance as well for ways that we can, one, come together regardless of all of our differences. And also, two, is to help ourselves not only heal with sound, with music, with dance, but also how do we expand and evolve with music, sound, dance, all these incredible things, right? And I think really now is the time that we lean on these tools, these modalities more than ever because of all that's happening, but not just for our own sanity and our own healing, but to really come into this new frequency and to expand and to evolve. So that's what gets me so excited. I think now is really, it's never been a better time for the arts. It's never been a better time for the creative things like music. So I'm really excited where we are right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel those of us who tap into this frequency of love, as you're saying, into the collective understanding of unity, music comes along with it. I know my arsenal of instruments have only been expanding in the last decade. I've never thought of myself as a musician, but as you start tuning in and connecting, all of a sudden you have a wind chime here, you have a sound ball. Eventually, that musical instrument, handpan, came into my life, and I was like, whoa, how do I learn this? So, what about these more, I would say, organic instruments that really connect us. And maybe we can talk about the frequency of 432 hertz. That is the organic way versus what the cultural music out there, which is on 440 hertz.
Yeah, and that's it's a big conversation. It's a really cool and interesting topic. And before I even get into that, you raised a really good point that a lot of what I was just speaking to before, what's also happening with people is a lot of other people are coming into music right now and that weren't maybe traditionally what they would consider musical, or they never thought they were a musician. Because I always get from a lot of people that, oh, Chris, I can't really do music. I'm not a musician. And I always say that's BS. If you're a human being, you're musical. We are all musical. Just because I
Mhm.
studied this and have dedicated more of my life to it doesn't make me any less musical than someone else. So we're all musical creatures. And I think the more all of us as humans just find ways to express that, whether it's playing a handpan, hitting a tambourine, playing a piano, it doesn't matter. Singing does not matter what it is, but that form of expression is so powerful and so helpful and so healing and so fun. And we need to remember how to have fun again. We need to remember how to play. And a lot of us lose that as we progress through life, right? So music is one of the best ways. As one of my good friends, musician friends, always says, you don't work music, you play music, right? It's not something we
Mhm.
work. We have to get into our inner child to be able to be musical. So I recommend everyone find an instrument, start playing, just get into it. And who cares if you're a professional or not? It's just so worthwhile. And then one of the reasons why I even came into this whole idea of 432 hertz tuning was because I knew music was so powerful, even just as it is right now, even pop music. We think about anyone who's watching and listening to this, just think about a moment in your life when a specific song may have saved your life or at least brought you through a really challenging time, like a certain artist, a certain song, certain piece of music that you just would go back to because it gave you this comfort or it gave you this sense of relief or release or whatever it is, right? We've all had that moment with music at some point in our life, maybe at many points in our life. So I wanted to learn what's going on. Why is it that we can have such a strong response to some form of music, and that same song that one of us might have a really strong response to, you play for someone else, they don't care at all, it has zero response. How is music so individualized and yet so universal? How is it so healing? I wanted to learn all about that stuff, and that's what led me into this area of 432 hertz. And as a maybe a shorter explanation of what it all is. Basically, when you're listening to music pretty much anywhere now at this point, let's say it's Spotify, online, whatever it is, right? On the radio, you're likely going to hear music when you're listening on any of these major platforms. You're likely going to hear music all tuned to what's called concert pitch. And concert pitch was a
Mm.
decided upon frequency that all the instruments will tune their home note to. So when I sometimes do my meditation workshops, which we'll be doing in Sedona, I give like a real live demonstration of what that sounds like. But basically, when you're at, like, if you've ever seen an orchestra before they play, before the orchestra performs, they're all tuning ahead of time, so you always hear that orchestra pit sound. It's very iconic. Most people know what that sounds like. What they're actually doing is they're all tuning that concert pitch, that home frequency. They're all finding that specific frequency, tuning all the instruments to it so that they sound in tune, right? So what happens when you change that home frequency? What happens when you change this frequency that we've all tuned all the instruments to? So that's called concert pitch. What 432 hertz is, it's tuning down. So the standard frequency that all music we hear is at 440 hertz. So that's this A note. It's that home frequency that was decided, okay, we're going to do it at 440 hertz. Now the whole world tunes all
Mm.
their instruments to that home frequency. What I'm doing is I'm changing that home frequency down to 432 hertz so that the base of every note that we're now tuning to is centered around the frequency of 432 hertz. Now, when we've seen studies of the frequency 432 hertz and what it does with water, as a great example, Dr. Emoto did great experiments with this. You can see in the water, remember, we're pretty much 90 something percent water when you add in our organs and all this other stuff. We're still water.
Even DNA is also apparently pretty water based. Yeah, we're aquatic beings
We
for
are,
sure.
right? We know water also has
Yeah.
memory and all this other stuff, and it's pretty incredible. So if you and then you come even further back, we know through quantum physics that we are also all in a state of vibration, right? And so if everything's in water and vibration and motion, then vibration and frequency play a huge role, right, in our day-to-day life, right? So with that being said, they've done some studies now where they took 432 hertz and 440 hertz and they vibrated those frequencies in water, took photos, took video, and the photographs of 440 hertz in the water were not that symmetrical. They were a little muddy. And then the 432
Mm.
hertz in water is a beautiful crystalline structure. It's actually the cover of my EP is what 432 hertz looks like photographed in a tank of water, essentially. So I put that as my album
Mm.
cover. If you go on my Spotify, you can see what that looks like. It actually looks a little bit like a heart shape, which is really interesting because 432 hertz is known as the love frequency. Isn't that interesting that the icon that we always think about as a heart is actually the vibration? This is what the vibration of love looks like. And that's a pretty incredible. We think it's just a random icon as a heart. No, that heart is the frequency of love, 432 hertz. So basically, imagine what music can then feel like if you're tuning the music to a harmonious frequency, one that actually resonates with the cells in your body, with your DNA. As you said, what happens when we can
Mm.
actually give our bodies, our DNA, and our cells even more powerful frequencies? Because 442 hertz music is not a bad thing per se. We've had so many healing experiences with that kind of music. So I'm not saying that music isn't powerful. It's just even more powerful when we tune it down to 432 hertz. So from my experience doing this for the last 6, 7 years now, it's been very profound. Every time I have tried the same exact piece of music at 440 hertz versus 432 hertz, everyone, and I do like a blind test, right? I don't tell them what I'm doing. They always respond to the 432 hertz every single time. It's really fascinating. I almost, with no exception, every time I play the 432 hertz, they always say, it feels better. I feel better. I like it. They don't know why. We can't think of the explanation. We just feel better. So when I tune all that music to 432 hertz, that's going to absorb into your body. And at my meditation workshops, what we do is we get everyone to lie down and just receive these vibrations of 432 hertz music and sound.
I
Yeah.
just found my tuning forks. I have so many of them. Tuning forks are amazing too. And I don't know if you work with them, but I love them because it's like you can literally comb the field of the person with a sound and with a frequency. This one is a B, but like there's different notes, solfeggio notes, different notes for the chakras. If anyone into sound and wants to understand sound healing, that's something to look
Right,
into.
because the tuning forks play a lot into our field of energy that we broadcast as well. And
Yeah.
so when we're using like what tuning forks are really good for is harmonics. So when you hit the tuning fork and then you play another one, they'll have different frequencies that then interfere with one another sometimes. And that interference pattern creates new frequencies. And a lot of healing that comes with sound healing isn't actually from the core frequency. It's the healing typically comes from all the overtones and the vibrations created outside of that. So it's all the nuances and all the specific frequencies that come from these tuning forks or an instrument. That's what creates the healing. What's really interesting for anyone out there, let's say you struggle with sleep or you want to concentrate more at work, there's a type of sound therapy called binaural beats. And binaural beats are doing what Deanna does with or tuning forks a little bit. So let's say you have a tuning fork on one ear that's a B, and then another tuning fork on another ear that's like an A. They're close together, but they're not the same note, right? So when you put one on one ear and the other on another ear, you're going to create like a whoa, whoa, whoa kind of an effect. And that wobbling, that interference pattern that you're hearing will actually go through your ears and go through your brain when that happens. And what that's called is brain entrainment. So you're telling your brain what frequency you want it to go to now. So if you create a binaural beat of, let's say, oh, I don't know, like 12 hertz, you're going to get it into an alpha wave state, right? Or wherever you want to go to, you can use binaural beats to put your brain into that state of consciousness. So once again, sound, when I first got into all this stuff, I was just stressed out. I was working in film production at the time. Anyone that's worked in film knows how crazy that industry is. I was very stressed out and I was having trouble
Mhm.
concentrating. So I just went on YouTube and typed in focus music, concentration music. And then this whole thing of binaural beats came out and I was fascinated and kept learning more and more. And because the results for me, I would knock off that to do list so much faster when I was listening to my binaural beats. And to this day, I still work with them, and there's just so many ways that we can, whether it's 432 hertz tuning, whether it's binaural beats, solfeggio frequencies are another thing. There's a lot of these ancient practices and things we can do with sound that are amazing. And we're going to bring a lot of those to the retreat in Sedona.
I always feel when I'm in the vortexes, when you bring your sound instrument with you, music, you start listening to the music of the land. And the music of the land, the specific vortexes have their own specific melody or story. And you start co creating together with the land and with your biofield. My experience has always been whether with a drum, because I love my shamanic drum, and then you go into a little bit of a channeling. There's always a really deep activation that happens, and the music is a big part of that. I'm going to try to bring my handpan. We'll see. I've never carried it on a
Please
plane yet.
do.
It's a big UFO thing that needs to be transported, but maybe I'm really called to bring it because that would be super amazing. Like I can see myself sitting on Bell Rock and playing
I
that.
would strongly suggest, it's one of my favorite instruments is the handpan. It's so beautiful. It's amazing because you can meditate really well to that, but then you can also dance because it's very relaxing, or it can be quite rhythmic. And we could get a great jam
Yeah.
session going, which we absolutely will. And if you bring that out, I'll bring my guitar on the hike so we can do the guitar and the handpan or
Yeah,
something.
I think it's coming. I have a hard case for it, so I think I'm gonna bring it. As
Do
we talking,
it.
I'm like seeing myself with you. So I'm like, oh my god, I have to make it happen. It will be exciting. I know you and I are really passionate about dance and somatic medicine dance, and I've been ecstatic dance teacher
Mm.
and this modality that I have of I call quantum soul dance, which is a blindfolded ecstatic
Oh, I
dance
love that.
journey that I've yeah, I've done over a decade. We'll definitely have some variation of that. My medicine has always been through movement. Like I need to move the energy, and the music is, of course, part of that. How the body surrenders and goes through the different journeys with the music. And Kundalini activation too. It's all kind of one thing. We have frequency beings, right? So we connect to that. So yeah, I wanted to hear your experience with how you got into somatic
Yeah,
dancing.
I just DJ'd an event a couple nights ago. I do a dance event called Dance is Medicine, and I'm trying to bridge basically the
Mhm.
rave culture, the club culture, and the ecstatic dance culture all together in one event, basically. I really love facilitating for all walks of life, and everyone can dance, just like music. Everyone can listen to music, everyone can dance. It's so universal. And so for me, what got me more into dance, of course, I've been enjoying dance my whole life, even as a kid, obviously. But what got me into it in a different degree was just actually only, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. And I was in a relationship at the time. My partner, she loved going to raves. So I hadn't done raves in quite a long time and went back with more of a spiritual, let's say, perspective on it. And not only, I was moving through some challenging things at the time. And I remember the incredible relief I felt after one of the first times going out to just a dance night with one of her DJ friends. And I remember feeling at the end of that night, I was going through a lot. I can't remember even what I was going through at the time, but challenging emotions. And I remember at the end of the dance event, forgetting what I was even worried about. I was just so relieved and felt such a sense of just don't worry about it. You got this. Whatever it is, you'll figure it out, Chris. That was the feeling after moving all this stuck energy, because as that's that classic cliche, our emotions are energy in motion. So if we're not putting our bodies through that motion to move the energy, where does it go? Nowhere. It gets stuck. And what happens when it gets stuck? Obviously, we get into dis-ease and all these other ailments that we suffer from. So once I started to move it through dance, specifically through dance, because I love yoga as well. It's a big one of my big movement modalities that I absolutely love. But the difference I do find with yoga versus straight up dancing is dance is way more playful. And I mean, yoga can obviously be playful, but dance I find is just that next level of playful, Don't think about it. Technique does not matter at all. You just get to be a child again. Let that inner child out. Go crazy, be silly, be goofy, be serious, whatever it is. You get to just be that on the dance floor. And when it's with music, there's this beautiful marriage of the music takes you on the journey, and then you take your own journey with that music. And it's this play back and forth. The feeling that gives me personally, there's been many times I've done these events or gone to dance parties with a good DJ or something where I don't even have any substances. I'm completely sober and I feel like I just took 4 grams of mushrooms or something because it feels so euphoric, and it feels almost, it is its own form of medicine, which is literally why I call my events Dance is Medicine, because it is. It's just so, it's so healing, and the funniest part about it all is it's so much fun. So it's one of those things that I'm starting to get more into because I'm a big believer. Look, we shadow work's really important. I love the shadow. I think we need the shadow, and we live in polarity. We need all this. Yes. And I am focused now more on healing through play, healing through joy, healing through pleasure. Of course, we can still heal through our suffering. We always do, and we always will have those moments. But I'm a big believer now that we can also heal through pleasure and through play and through all this cool stuff as well. And dance for me is one of those fun things where we can just let all of it go, shake out that stress, and just come into ourselves, come into that pure source version of yourself. And when you're in a song and you're on that dance floor, and Deanna, exactly what this feels like, right? Where you're just in that moment, you
Mhm.
are gone. Like you've left the planet. You're in some beautiful other dimension of reality. And music and dance for me are one of the quickest and most fun ways to get you to that place. So that's why I love dance. There's many reasons, but it's one of the reasons.
For sure. And it's amazing. It could take you really far out. It could take you like into different realms and different realities. And you can experience shadows too. I think it goes through myriad of expressions. We are full spectrum beings and we have all these emotions, energy and emotion we have to process. And I feel through movement, we really get to move the energy and transform it and transmute it into something different. I really got into ecstatic dance back in 2010 when I moved into New York with Five Rhythms. And I don't know if
Oh
you're
yeah.
familiar with Gabrielle Roth. Yeah, she was still alive. I had the pleasure of meeting her and being in her classes before she passed. We have a dance parade here in the city that happens usually in May. And it was such an incredible experience of having our Five Rhythms float, which I helped to coordinate and dance through the streets of New York. And
Oh,
you have
cool.
all these people watching you. There's like adrenaline rush, but you really get into the music, into the movement of it all. And it almost doesn't matter. Are you in the streets of New York? There's a time dilation. It just passes by and you just like in this euphoria. See, similar in her classes. And what you just mentioned about chaos, that exactly was the map of how Gabriel was teaching it. You breathing it in, you're breathing it out, you let it in, let it out. And then there's the letting go process. So that's the chaos. You have to dance it out. You have to shake your head. You have to shake your whole body to process what's happening, like any situation. Then after you're done with the chaos, there's still a little bit left. There's like the lyrical aspect of it, but you feel much lighter. Ultimately, the last rhythm is stillness, where you can just bring and integrate all of that into this moment of now and just stop and be with it. And I feel that's the process we go in general through our emotions, through whatever comes up. And if we understand the rhythms of our lives, the rhythm of dance, a part of this journey of our evolution and what we're feeling, then music is dance. Music is intentional, and the dance is intentional, and it can be a very healing process. So that's why I love teaching it. If someone comes to my dance floor and they leave transformed and changed in their state of consciousness or realizations of self, I've done my job. That's exciting for me.
I totally agree. I had a woman come to my event on just a couple days ago who was going through her Kundalini awakening, and she was hesitant to come out because she was having actually quite a lot of back pain. And her friend was like, "Oh no, come on out, because what better way to potentially move through this than through dance?" And so she did. And all of a sudden, by the end of the night of dancing, she was like, wow, I don't even have any pain anymore in my back. It's gone. And I must have moved all that
Mhm.
energy. And especially for her with her Kundalini awakening, as we know with Kundalini energy, it is that serpent snake energy. And where does it usually goes up your spine, right? So of course, dancing and moving that energy, it was exactly what she needed to move through that. So the cool thing as well about dance is it gives you exactly whatever you need in that moment. It might be that you need the opposite, actually. You need to just be really slow with your movement, maybe really tender instead of a lot of movement. Maybe you need to be slow and fluid. And that's what you need in that day because you're more of a tender energy. I don't know. It makes you have to contemplate where you're at. And then your body will naturally move and do whatever it needs to do, which is really cool because you can go on autopilot at that point and let your body and your body intelligence take over. And ultimately, it's a great exercise in authenticity and letting go because you just let your pure expression come through. And especially in an event like it sounds like what you do, Deanna, and what we'll do in Sedona, sure, for sure, is to create that environment so that people can really let that out, like really let that part of you out. That maybe if you're at a club, you might hold back a bit, but at our things, you're going to go all out, let that true self out, right?
Yeah. Totally. And that's why this whole blindfolded modality was something that I really resonated with because it can be a way to not be worried about the people around you and really go inwards. And then it becomes a dance within that. And then you exploring boundaries of the space and where you are and what is possible. It's really interesting to experience these different multi senses that we have. Like we think we have five. Of course, we have many more than that. As you take away the sight, for instance, it's incredible how the music all of a sudden starts resonating differently for you. Now you're relying on the music and we really feel in the space and you stepping into this void space of the unknown and exploring. For some people it's new territory, like they've never done that. They've always used to have the light, not used to the darkness. There's different ways that I think dance can be a very interesting experience. You mentioned Kundalini, and that's something we're going to be doing at a retreat as well. Kundalini activation is something I really got into in the last 2 years, and I became certified in it. I've been energy healer for over 2 decades, and it's just really interesting. We always think it's a snake, but the activation of it can also happen not from the root up, and actually can be a transmission from crown chakra
Mm,
down. That's more like the feminine way. So, an idea is to start activating the toroidal field, the frequencies within us. So, the snakes is what we know from the Kundalini yoga. And yes, they meet in the third eye, but there's a lot of more vibration in our field. And the idea is to really go into this vibrational field, and the field is up and down and all around. We constantly spin it to recognize that we are that energy, we are that frequency, that very high
mm,
voltage too. So some people experience a lot of heat, some the energy kind of cools down and drops. Also physical experiences when Kundalini activates. But to what you mentioned, a lot of people awaken right now. Kundalini awakens, light language, the expression of who they are is activated. Those are the things that we bring into the retreat: how to express yourself fully, how to be in the flow. If Kundalini wants to wake up, great, and the space will facilitate that. And if you want to express yourself with your voice and let that voice be heard, that's another
mhm.
way. So all of it is part of this co-creation of the self with what's around. A friend who was a channeler recommended, she like, get your single bowl and then just play. It was my first 432 instrument.
Hey.
And the minute you start playing 432, it was just getting easier to get into channeling and be in that very organic flow.
Yeah, it's crazy actually how sometimes my piano, I tune it back and forth because if I'm playing with other artists, of course, they're all back at 440 hertz. I'm always tuning back and forth depending on projects. But when I go back to my projects that are all 140, 432 hertz, every time I tune it back down, I'm always like, ah, there we go. And it's such a funny thing. I'm like, I just feel that immediate relief. And it's such a funny situation for me. But then you brought up something else that I thought was really interesting. And it speaks to just this power of music that I wanted to just elaborate on quickly here is with another thing that I really thought that was incredible with music is that it will enter parts of your mind and your brain that you're not even aware of and will have these beautiful effects. So I'll give an example. This is something I tell a lot of people about because it was one of the moments in my life where I realized, wow, there is a power to music and there's a power to sound.
Mm.
And I feel sometimes I should be relabeling my job title as magician, not musician, because I'm telling you,
I love
it's
it.
so magical,
Totally both.
right? So here's the story. So many years ago, I was just getting out of college for music. My first gig out of college was to play at old age homes. So retirement homes, senior homes where most people are sending their the parents or the grandparents or whatever much later in life, and sometimes it's not a great situation for them there. When I would go into those places, I was basically the entertainment, sometimes for the month, so it'd be a big deal for these people. And at first I was like, ah, whatever, it's a gig, who cares? And I went and did the thing, and I remember even at my first gig just realizing how much that music meant to these people, especially at this point in their life. Sometimes they didn't get a lot of human interaction, unfortunately, and this music was just a way to interact with them, and they really loved it. But it wasn't until a couple of gigs into it where I had this one situation with a gentleman who was probably in his early 90s, and he was in a wheelchair, couldn't move much. And I heard briefly that he had a form of dementia, and this form of dementia kept him very crippled, not much movement, very couldn't remember the name of his some of his family members, all that kind of stuff. Very challenging. And so I was performing, I started to play an Elvis song, Hound Dog, one of his classics. And this song just so happened to be one of this gentleman's favorite songs from when he was a teenager. And this
Mm.
song entered his brain, and I could see it happening while I was playing the piano and singing. And it entered, it washed over him and entered his being basically. And all of a sudden I started to see like limbs start to move, starts tapping his toes, starts moving his head. And then all of a sudden he's trying to push himself out of his chair, push himself out of his wheelchair. And he does. And then he starts to move and starts to dance. And then his daughter's blown away at what's going on because she was visiting this same day. And so she goes over to him to be like, "Are you okay? Do you need any assistance?" And then instead of getting assistance, he grabs her hand and they start to dance. And they just start dancing like when he was at his prom, whatever that was, 80 something years ago. And all of a sudden, this magic just entered the room where I got like goosebumps. I remember at the time, you could just feel something really incredible was happening. And the fact is that this music animated him. It literally animated a person that has a neurological disorder that was really severe. And it was causing not only memory loss, but loss of functionality with his body. And all of a sudden, that's gone, and he's just dancing and he's just animated and he's connecting with his daughter in a way that he may not have been able to for many years. And they're both crying at the end of this moment. I'm crying, and I don't think there's a dry room in the whole, a dry eye in the whole room after this moment, because you could just see like the joy and the love. And what was the foundation of all of that was music, was a song that this man loved very much, and it brought him back to where his body was when he was 19, not 90. And so his brain was almost tricked by the music to think that he's a young man all of a sudden, and he was able to move and do all that. And so in that moment, I was pretty dumbfounded with just what I was actually tapping into with music and what the real possibilities with sound and music as a healing modality, as an evolutionary modality, as an enhancement modality. It can really be applied to now anything. Like where I now specialize in my music, I call it therapeutic music, but I also sometimes call it functional music. I teeter on different names for it
Mm.
because half the time when I'm working with my clients now, like I'm writing a piece of music to help them sleep. I'm writing a piece of music to help them concentrate, maybe. I'm writing a hypnotic piece to help them totally get rid of addiction to smoking, maybe. The list continues to go on and on infinitely of all the things we can do with sound, with music, not as entertainment anymore, which is still great. But we don't need to just entertain with it. Now we can go back and remember what we used to do all the time in the ancient times or not so ancient times with sound and with music, which was to use it to enhance your life, use it to heal, use it to work on all these other parts of yourself, right? And why all these temples and pyramids were built with acoustics in mind, even churches, right? We go into churches, it's beautiful, it echoes, it's perfect for the ambience, it's perfect for a choir. Why? Because they understood that sound and music heals, and it does incredible things to expand your awareness and your consciousness. So they would design with sacred geometry and architecture in mind how to enhance the frequencies of this music, which is why these places would look and sound so beautiful. So all that's to say, it is infinite what we're tapping into with these powers of sound and music and healing. And I'm actually even more now excited after just talking to you, Deanna, about what you could bring with your handpan. We're going to create some really profound, paradigm shifting musical and sound modalities on this trip.
We're gonna be in the interdimensional portal, and it's everything we do there is gonna affect humanity. That literally what was channeled by your last episode. I always knew that. I don't know. Every time I would be in Sedona, I would be only going to Bellrock. It's like the thing when my husband Daniel and I go for sunrise, but getting this confirmation and knowing that the effect of what we do there, not just from a personal level, but there's a collective connection. These vortexes are really ancient trees. You and I talked
Yeah.
about it. They've been here for eons, and these trees just been cut down in the beginning of Earth time. The reason they are interdimensional portals is because of this connection via these trees, even though it's like a tree trunk. And you can even look at it like from a picture
Yeah.
from afar, and it looks like a tree trunk. There's these mesas. Sedona is just known to have so vortexes. There's other places around the world I have been to in Brazil, and there's always UFO activity happening
Mm-hmm.
there. The veil is very thin there. It's literally this in between realms connection. And I feel music, like you were saying, the harmonics of the universes, the harmonics of the different realms. Through music, we can tap into these different realms, and especially being in a very special place like that. I wanted to also respond to what you were saying. It's such a beautiful story that you're sharing. Thank you so much. From the nursing home touched my heart. It also reminded me about my grandparents, especially my grandmother. They no longer alive, but when they were, my grandma also had a dementia,
Mm.
and she loved playing piano. And when my kid was born, realized I want to learn piano. It's never too late. And I started learning with him. And then at some point, even learned like this classical, like very difficult Tchaikovsky piece.
Beautiful.
I was like, oh, my grandma would be so proud. Then we were at this party, and this girl had this project where she goes to different hospitals, and she also does sound healing, but more so she's trying to change the systems in these different hospice places and nursing homes, because she was saying all that beeping in the
Thank
background
you.
actually is so non-harmonic, right? And we need to bring more harmony into these places. She's working on technology of sound and together with these hospital systems to bring it back there. And what was interesting, what she said was that the sound is the last thing the person hears when they die. So when all the senses start disconnecting, if you go through like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the last thing is actually the sound. That's the last thing you hear. So when I learned that my grandmother during COVID was going, and it was like hard to even get into nursing home, I had this vision. So I bought this little MP3 player, and I just downloaded a bunch of classical favorites of hers. When I came there to and I was like, okay, you must play this to all the nurses till her last minute. And they were like, why? Like they couldn't understand, even though she wasn't fully present and plus the dementia. I knew that the music is what can really still connect her to who she is.
Absolutely.
Even if she's somewhere not even fully conscious, she's still hearing those vibrations.
I have a story on that, and that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So, my grandfather inspired me when he was still in this physical dimension. He had Parkinson's, so we're all the same: Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. And when he had Parkinson's, that was when I was just getting into this music healing, music therapy side of things. So I took it on to myself to see if I could figure out a way to write a piece of music that could help my grandfather's Parkinson's in any way,
Mm.
whatever I could. So I started actually looking up research, and I actually found a TED Talks by a Canadian university that studied the phenomenon of 40 hertz. So specifically the frequency 40 hertz with any neurological disorder. And of course, like a lot of these really great studies, they lose funding very quickly and don't get to be fully realized. But even in its small state of a study, it was very profound. And it showed that the 40 hertz, when it was played through speakers and also played through headphones, the patients typically would see not a decline per se, but certainly a halt. It would stop the deterioration and it wouldn't get any worse, which is already actually pretty phenomenal. Even if you can just not have it get any worse, that's still pretty amazing. So I was like, okay, let's try this 40 hertz thing. Let's see what happens. So I wrote a piece of music. I put 40 hertz into it, and then I just put it on the internet and just whatever. We'll see what happens. For some reason, this piece of music became my most popular piece. And the funniest thing is two things. So the funny thing was there's a side effect of the 40 hertz. And the side effect is it knocks you out and puts you to sleep. So a lot of people started using this actually just to fall asleep, not for Alzheimer's or dementia or Parkinson's, but they used it to sleep. So great. If that's what happens, then I'm all for it. But what was really interesting, so I played it. My grandfather, like, he got to receive it a little bit, but then he passed away quite quickly after I had written this piece. So as this piece has now existed for 4+ years now, it's been received by different people. And most recently, this piece for Alzheimer's and dementia, my friend, just less than a year ago, she was around my age. I'm 36. She's like something in that ballpark. Her partner, her boyfriend, was suffered a brain injury and was actually in a coma for 7 days, around my age as well. And he came out of the coma, but had really bad memory loss, so bad that he couldn't even remember my friend, his girlfriend's name. And to have this memory loss, especially at such an even younger age, is wow, that's challenging. So she was really scared in this moment and messaged me and was like, do you have anything you can send me, any of your music, anything that might help? So of course, the first thing I thought, I'm like, I gotta send her the 40 hertz thing, and if anything else helps, great, but let's just see if that does anything. Long story short, she plays it for him. After an hour and a half of playing this for him in the hospital, all of a sudden she just she goes back into the room, and all of a sudden he's like looking at her differently, not from fear of who are you, but now looking at her like he knows her. And then he says, hey babe. And all of a sudden she's, oh my god, he's back, like he's back. And she asked him, like, what helped you? Whatever music you were playing felt like parts of my consciousness were in this other dimension of reality, and the music was like a string, like a lifeline that pulled him back into this physical reality where he actually can remember who his partner is and everything else like that. So this 40 hertz music literally brought him out of a memory recess from a coma back into his regular mind. And when I met him 6 months later, it was such a beautiful moment because he didn't know that I had written that music. And we were talking about his time in the hospital and this whole horrible ordeal that he had to go through. But this magic that also happened, which he realized, oh my God, I remember in this moment. So he's like, Chris, wait, you wrote that music? And I was like, oh, yeah, I wrote it. And he looked at me and walked right over and gave me the biggest hug. And when he was hugging me, he said, man, thank you. That music brought me back to life. He's that saved my
No.
life, man. Thank you. And I'm not saying this from my ego. It's to share, this is the power of music. This is the
Yeah.
power of sound. And we're just tapping into it. So imagine where we're going to go with this in the future. It's so exciting.
Yeah. I love also, like, we've been playing with a lot of like quantum technology as well, and you can layer music on top of it. And we've been also having a lot of people from coma coming out using this kind of frequency, light, and sometimes music. When you would mention in the story with the coma, I was like, oh wow, we just literally had a success story with another person who came out of coma. And this is like a sixth person in the last 2 years
Wow.
that we've been coming out
That's
of comas.
amazing.
Yeah, you and I like saving people from coma in however way we can. It's what he just said that really resonated for me. I think what we creating is this string, this orientation possibly to this reality, since we in this quantum field of potentialities and there's so many parallel realities, realms, and all of that. It's interesting, like what happens on the other side and how your consciousness is a living, breathing thing. It's outside of our body and it can get stuck somewhere. And so, if we can orient it back to here, in however we can with the music, with some other quantum technology ways. Yeah, it does bring them back. And that's amazing. We're all magicians, right? The alchemists and magicians of reality. Thank you, Chris, so much for being here and sharing your passion for music. I feel like every DJ friend that I have is super excited about what they do. It becomes your life, and it is a medicine. So, if someone wants to hear your music, what's the best way to find information?
I'll give you some links you can throw for people to click, but essentially just go to chrisnoblemusic.com or wherever you listen to music, Spotify, Apple, whatever, just type in Chris Noble and I'll come up. My first EP is called 432. It's hard to miss. And it's got that heart, vibration in the water. So again, that's another thing you can look for. I'll be releasing a lot more this year too. And again, it's all 432 Hertz. I'm going to get more of my meditation music up on Spotify. All of it lives on YouTube right now. But basically, you just go to chrisnoblemusic.com. It's all going to be there for you.
Amazing. And I think I share with you, but I want to share with the audience about that specific Spotify album you had. I was in the sauna listening to it and I went on a journey.
Good.
Like the magnetic blanket, the first song was literally magnetic, and following those songs, it was just such a deep experience. And I remember after that, I like moved to jacuzzi, and that was my first time experiencing new music. And I was like, whoa, it's taking me to places and I'm experiencing these different visions and vibrations and planets. So it's incredible what music can do, as we've talked about it today. I highly recommend to listen to that album. Be ready to be taken to places. And I'm excited for all the music you're going to be bringing out this
Mm.
year, too.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And obviously, thanks for everyone for tuning in and listening. And come check us out in Sedona. I just can't wait to see what we create with that. It's going to be so fun. The land does so much already. And it's such a magical, special place. But then to co create with you and the rest of the team, that's just a dream come true. And I'm so honored to be there. It's going to be so much fun, so transformative.
For those who are tuning in, you can find more information about the Sedona Retreat at quantumcodesretreat.com. And if you have more information, just reach out directly, Deanna at deannadivine.com. So if this is resonating with you and you want to be part of our intimate and really powerful group where we get to dance, listen to music, meditate, expand, this is the experience that we're going to be co-creating with you, and be very excited
Hmm.
to be with you soon. Thank you,
Thank
Chris.
you.
And thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. You can visit my website, deannadivine.com, where I'm now offering a special Quantum Master Creator free ebook that will help you to create the conscious dimensional life that you want. I'm also offering other programs, one-on-one sessions such as Quantum Healer Hypnosis and Quantum Crystalline Soul Healing to help you in your vibrational alignment. On sourcelanguage.org, I'm offering a digitized course that is self-paced to open you to the divine gift of light language. I'm Deanna Divine. Keep connecting with your higher self.